Tula's Tips for Caregivers. Help is on the air with Tula Wooten, your source to go for resources and information to help you in this rewarding but sometimes challenging role. Now here's Tula.
Well, welcome everyone to another show of Tula's Tips for Caregivers. Most of you know that I've been doing this radio show for 10 years now, trying to reach out and help caregivers of our elders. I always prefer that word to seniors. I think it gives more respect. But caregivers are a growing population in our nation. We have over 44 million of them today, and many of them are caring for someone who is over the age of 65, 70, 75. And with that comes a lot of responsibility, a lot of stress sometimes, a lot of uncertainties. And so my show is here to help you, the caregiver, find some inspiration, some encouragement, and always to connect you to resources that might help you. Today's show is going to be a little bit different. I'm honored to have today Ms Senior Jacksonville on the show, Brenda Griffin. She is Ms Senior Jacksonville of 2019. Welcome to the show, Brenda.
Thank you, Tula. It's my pleasure to join you.
Well, I'm happy to have you. I'm going to tell everybody a little bit about you, and then we're going to have a little discussion about your role here. Brenda has a passion for learning and teaching and sharing information with others to help them achieve their own personal and professional goals. She's a 30-year veteran of the financial services and insurance industry, where she specialized in the field of human resources management. Brenda holds a master's degree of education from FSU, Florida State University, where she majored in counseling and human systems. Brenda is, like I said, Ms Senior Jacksonville 2019, but she's most proud of being a wife, mother, and grandmother. The most fulfilling roles in life, right?
Right, exactly.
Mm-hmm. So, Brenda, tell me a little bit about yourself.
I am, as you mentioned, I'm a mother, I'm a grandmother. In addition to that, I have a 30-year career with Prudential Insurance Company. And during my career, I became very interested in planning for my own retirement and using a lot of the tools and resources I had through Prudential. And since 2014, I have been what I call a financial wellness advocate. Part of my my platform for Ms Senior Jacksonville is financial wellness. And for the last about 6 years, I have been doing a workshop that I call Financial Tips for the Believer, where I am teaching mainly people in the Christian and church community debt reduction tips, budgeting skills, and advocating for saving.
That's such important information for everyone, believers and non-believers alike, to have.
Exactly.
And in our world, I think you probably know better than me, most Americans aren't real good at saving for their retirement. Am I right?
You're right about that. And that's why a lot of companies now have employees opt out of 401k plans instead of opting in, because Americans aren't saving enough for retirement. And there's so much debt that Americans are facing.
You know, it's hard for me to understand that. I guess it's because I was raised by a father who always emphasized the importance of saving. You know, so from the time I was, 28 years old, one of my first jobs, and I heard the person from the VALIC industry at the hospital I was working at talk about the importance of saving, because someday you're not going to want to be working full time anymore.
Exactly.
I started, and I'm so glad I did, because I was able to retire a little bit early at the age of 62. And again, another thing to thank my father for. I have so many things to thank him for, but I don't understand why people, even if it's just $10 a paycheck, you know better than me how that accumulates and grows over time, but we don't seem to stress that, particularly to our younger folks these days.
Yes, and I've even seen where a lot of schools now are teaching financial wellness skills, even, in the high school area. And even I've seen where some of the colleges are instituting those programs too. Because, when we start younger, our opportunity to save more is better.
Well, I'm glad you're doing that because that's a message that needs to be heard by a lot of people. So let's talk a little bit about Ms Senior Jacksonville. What did you do in the pageant, and what's been your experience being Ms Senior Jacksonville?
I'm glad to talk about that. Ms Senior Jacksonville is a pageant for women that are 60 years of age and older. In addition to Ms Senior Jacksonville, Kenyon Demp, who is the CEO of A Season Affairs, the organization that hosts the pageant, also has Ms Senior Diva, which is a pageant for women 50 to 59 years old. There are 4 components of the pageant. There's an interview, which takes place a week before the actual pageant, and that interview is with the judges. Then there's a talent segment, words of wisdom, and modeling evening wear. And
Wow.
Tula, I had never in my life even thought about entering a pageant. I didn't even have friends that were in pageants. And so for me to enter a pageant, I was 63 at the time, was a big step out of my box.
Out of your comfort zone, huh? It would be for me, too. Most of us don't even think about that. We think of, the tall, thin, beautiful, glamorous stars that we see on TV being in pageants. But this is not just about physical beauty. It's about physical beauty, but it's a little bit, I think, more in depth than that.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And, people ask me that all the time, is it a beauty pageant? And I say, no, it's not a beauty pageant. It's really an opportunity for women to expand their horizons, to experience some new things, to increase their sphere of influence. And I found just with my advocacy work for financial wellness that entering the pageant has really opened the door for me because I am meeting and interacting with so many people that I would not have had the opportunity had I not been in the pageant.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. It's helped you get the word out about something you are so passionate about.
Definitely.
So what have you done in the year that you've been Ms. Senior Jacksonville? Are you required to make appearances? What does that role entail?
Yes, so I am required to make a number of appearances within the year. And so far, it's been about 7 months, and I have probably made over 30 appearances. All of those aren't necessarily speaking engagements. I've done some things like I've been in the St. Augustine Christmas Parade and the Martin Luther King Parade. That was something totally new for me. I'd never been in a parade. I've had the opportunity to speak with women's groups, women's business organizations. And always my message isn't about financial wellness. A lot of times I've been asked to just inspire women. And I found that there's so many women who are fascinated and are excited about seeing a woman 60 or older entering a pageant and stepping out of her comfort zone. So that's been one of my big messages too, that we don't have to limit ourselves and our experiences just because we become a certain age.
That's good to hear because we all know, unfortunately, that ageism is still alive and well. And that
definitely
older people aren't always admired and respected as much as younger people. So good for you for having the courage to do it and for getting a message out. And I bet you can be real sassy as Ms. Senior Jacksonville, can't you?
I can.
Well, we haven't met.
Just ask my husband that question.
Okay, well, I might just do that. We'll probably meet in person so we can do that. Brenda, you've talked a little bit about what you're most passionate about, your platform of financial wellness, which, ladies and gentlemen who are listening to this, if you haven't attended a seminar on how to achieve financial wellness, I'm going to ask Brenda at the end of this interview today to give me information on how you might contact her because this is so important. And if you haven't started planning, really no age is too late to start. The sooner the better, obviously, but no age is too late to start. So we're going to give that information at the end of the show. And I thank you for your passion about that. It's really important.
Thank you.
So, Brenda, you know that caregiving is definitely my passion or my platform. I understand you've got some experience in caregiving yourself. Tell me more.
Well, my dad is 87 years old, and fortunately, he still lives independently and is in reasonably good health. So my caregiving responsibilities might be quite limited when compared to other people. Basically, my role with my father is helping him navigate the healthcare system, which can be so complicated as we become older, and also helping him with his financial matters.
That's a given for you, isn't it? And I'm sure he's very appreciative of that.
Yes, he is.
You know, I'm going to touch on what you said. First off, is one of your responsibilities is helping him navigate the healthcare system. That, unfortunately, can be one of the hardest roles of being a caregiver. I've worked in the healthcare industry for 40 years here in Northeast Florida, and when it came time to taking care of my own parents, you'd think I'd have known it and had an easy time of it. I did know it, but I sure didn't have an easy time of it. Our system is broken, in my view. It's fractured. There's not communication between one type of care and another. And if you're not on top of everything that your loved one needs and you don't advocate for them on a regular basis, your loved one may just not get the very best care. So caregivers, if you're out there listening, most of you know that I did care for my parents for about 5 years, and especially towards or in the last year of their lives, and especially for my dad, being his advocate sometimes was almost a full-time job. I had to advocate, maybe even stomp my little feet for him to get the care he needed and was paying for. Can you tell I still got a little passion in my voice about that?
Yeah, and that's so important too. My dad, in addition, is a veteran, so he gets some services from the Veteran Administration. And sometimes just calling and trying to find the right contact for information can be such a challenge. You know, there's a zillion prompts that you have to go through. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of our seniors, you know, they're frustrated by that, and especially if they might have some hearing difficulty like my dad does. And, you know, it can just be so frustrating and confusing.
It's very frustrating and confusing. I will tell you that every county has a Veteran Services Officer in place. And if you guys are in Duval County, I can help you with that after the show to connect you, because sometimes they can get through when the rest of us can't. That is one of the most frustrating things. I'm not elderly yet, I don't think, but when I have to press 11 prompts just to get to a real person, I'm usually pretty aggravated by that time if I haven't hung up. You know, so think of, you know, again, your 87-year-old person who just doesn't have the time, the wherewithal, the patience, and they're not feeling well or they wouldn't be calling in the first place. It's just something that, again, you can kind of tell frustrates me, so I'm hoping at some point that can be better addressed. Do you do anything else for your dad?
You know, I just also was thinking about just the number of scams, you know, from the financial standpoint. Even myself, I get all these calls during the day from this person and that person saying they're from the Social Security Administration or they're from this organization and that organization. And so I hope my father filter through some of those things too, and what's legitimate and not legitimate, and not to share personal information unless you call the particular agency and that kind of thing. So there's just so many traps out there for our elderly parents and family and friends.
I'm glad you do that, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because like you said, the traps are unfortunately plentiful and growing, and they prey on people who are older and maybe starting in the beginning stages of dementia or maybe have dementia, and they don't really know what they're doing, and they answer questions on the phone that they shouldn't have. Even the brightest people with no signs of dementia often do that, and I've had to actually follow up on a phone call that a person I know made and gave his credit card number out to someone he shouldn't have. You know, it's just, it feels so innocent. It often isn't. So I'm glad you're able to do that for your dad because it's daunting for our frail elders. Do you have any other tips or resources you want to maybe mention that those who are listening who are caregivers can utilize?
Well, just from my personal experience, one tip that I would give is that we have to be patient. When my father was growing up and, matured, we didn't have the kind of technology that we have today, of course. Mm-hmm. And so some things that I take for granted, especially having worked in the business environment for the number of years that I did, I can take some of these things for granted. It's like secondhand knowledge to me. Whereas sometimes I forget that my dad isn't techno-savvy. And so, taking the time to break things down in a way that our parents or whoever we're caregiving for can understand those things and to relate them to something maybe that they are familiar with so that they can better understand, the information you're giving or whatever. And then the other resource that I find quite helpful, not just for my dad, but for myself, and that is the AARP website and their publications. From a financial standpoint, from a caregiving standpoint, there is a wealth of information that AARP offers.
There really is. And as you know, I do a lot of public speaking on caregiving. I host a lot of conferences on caregiving, and I've been speaking on caregiving for about 12 years now. And I love that AARP has such a wonderful website devoted to caregiving. I mean, you just go and put in aarp.org/caregiving and all kinds of resources pop up. You can have the opportunity to interact with other caregivers on one of their websites. They've made it really very user-friendly. So I'm glad you mentioned that. And they do have a great financial wellness page, too. They are out there definitely to serve seniors or elders, as I like to put it. And I think they do a good job.
No, I was going to say one of the last things, too. I have quite a few friends that are dealing with parents that have dementia or Alzheimer's, and the last tip was, and I'm sure that you talked about this a lot on your show, is for caregivers to take care of themselves.
Yep. That has been my primary message to caregivers for 10 years on my radio show and in all the presentations that I give. It is the hardest thing to do. It's easy to say, but it's really sometimes very hard to do. And even though it has been my message since about 2009 in my caregiving role with my parents over 5 years, there was one year in particular that it was really difficult for me to do that because both of them required so much. And my mother had dementia, and the dementia, my dad was, they were both still living independently in their home at that time, and my dad was trying his best to take care of her, but I think the dementia was about to cause him to have another stroke, all the demands that she would make on him. And he would call me sometimes at work just so panicked and frustrated. That was my life for about a year. And sometimes I'd get a couple calls a day at work. And it finally got to where I was like, okay, time out here. We've got to make some changes here because I can't do this and work and take care of you guys. And that year in particular, I missed my own physical, I missed the mammogram. And I preach it to caregivers. So I do understand how hard it is. You've got to somehow schedule it in. I made up for it the next year and following because it wasn't a good thing, obviously. And I wanted to be a good example to all the caregivers that I care for. But I do get it. It's hard to put yourself at the top of your list because in most cases, you love the person that you're caring for so very, very much. You're willing to put everything on hold for them. And that's not always the best advice. You can't do that. You have to take time for yourself, do the things you love, get together with your girlfriends or your buddies, do the things that brought you joy, and for heaven's sake, see your own medical professionals for your own care, or else you may not be there to take care of your loved ones. So I appreciate you bringing that up. Let's talk about the pageant for just a minute. I understand it's coming up in just a few months.
Right. The 2020 pageant is on July 25th, and it will be at the University of North Florida beginning at 3 p.m. And so I hope some folks who've never been to one of the pageants will come out. Everyone is excited. Even though it's a competition, the environment is not competitive.
Right.
There's a lot of, just cheering the women on. And so it's a really great experience.
I was a judge several years ago. Kenyon asked me to step up and do that. And I remember it being a really happy, cheerful, wonderful experience. And I was just so proud of the women that were up on stage, being willing to strut in an evening gown and talk about whatever their platform was or their passion or do their talent act. I was so impressed. So if there are women out there listening to this and they're interested in maybe being in a pageant, what would you tell them to do, Brenda?
I would suggest they contact Kenyon Dempf, who is the CEO, or visit the website. The website is aseasonedaffairs.com, and all of the necessary information is posted on the website. All the requirements, information related to the 4 segments of the pageant. So everything that a woman would need to know would be on that website.
That's good to hear. And I have to just give a shout out to Kenyon. This is her idea. She came up with this pageant several years ago, and it's ongoing, and it's a wonderful event, and it is to celebrate the lives of women over 60, and I just think the world of you, Kenyon, for doing that and being able to do it all these years. So give the website again, Brenda.
It's aseasonedaffairs.com, yes.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Well, Brenda, this has been a fun interview. I've learned some stuff. Is there anything else you would like to add before we conclude our talk?
Yes, I will leave with this little parable real quickly. I just read an article about a man who had an alligator in his basement for 25 years. And he had the alligator in a small enclosure. And because the alligator was in a small enclosure, it did not grow to its full potential. And so we can be like that alligator. We can limit our exposure, our experience, and the environment that we're in. And so my advice to all of the folks out there who are 50 and 60 and 70 and 80 is to don't limit yourself, to enlarge your environment and your experiences.
That's great advice. We can learn every day. We can grow every day. You reminded me of a website that I like. It's called Growing Bolder. Not older, but bolder. And I follow them, and they post a lot of really interesting things. And that's one of the things they encourage, is for older folks to do new things that they haven't done before. I appreciate you saying that. You are a delightful person to talk to. I do hope we get to meet in person soon.
I do too.
Thank you again for being on my show.
And thank you for inviting me.
Happy to have you. Folks, you've been listening to Tula's Tips for Caregivers. I will be back next week with another show. But in the interim, I just wish all of you who are caring the highest, the most, and the greatest of blessings. And like Brenda said, remember to take care of yourself first. I love you. I'll be back.
Hi, this is Tula, and I'm here to talk to you about Baptist's new Age Well Institute. Are you caring for a loved one who's 65 or older? Are you a boomer like myself who's caring for a parent? And perhaps your parent has been experiencing some decline in their overall health. Let me highly recommend to you the Baptist Age Well Institute. They have the only real geriatrician here in Northeast Florida who is able to look at the whole person. Their comprehensive approach includes a nurse, a doctor, a social worker, a pharmacist, a dietitian. They have their own physical therapy there. They can work with folks with memory disorders. My goal is to help you, the caregiver, find an organization that can care for your loved one who's 65 or older. I take my own parents there, and I highly recommend the Agewell Institute at Baptist. Please give them a call at 904-202-4243. Again, that's 904-202-4243. You'll be so glad you did.
Have you read the new book, Love Stories and Timeless Tips, yet? It's by our own Tula Wooten, with Tula's Tips for Caregivers. Tula is a caregiver, too, as well as an expert on caregiving. You can get it in paperback or on Kindle at Amazon.com. The book is filled with touching stories of caregivers taking care of their loved ones. Each chapter has helpful ideas that we all can use. I love that Tula included a Tula's tip with each story. Her message to caregivers is clear. Take care of yourself so that you can take care of your loved one. This is a beautiful book for all caregivers to read, whether you're a part-time, full-time, or long-distance caregiver, or someone receiving care. You should get the book today. Just go to Amazon.com. Search for Love Stories and Timeless Tips by Tula Wooten.